Max was solitary, having no family because his family came to an end when the earth was ruined. So he is surviving alone on this barren land. Max observes some vehicles driving towards him. Then Max is driving away, getting into his car. But they capture Max going at a distance. Then they move to a place, imprisoning Max. It was the army of brutal men that had captured Max. And that brutal name was 𝗪𝗫𝗀. No government or management remained behind when the world rooted out its inhabitants. They had no administration, so they were leading a savage life. But 𝗪𝗫𝗀 has all the facilities such as meals, water, fuel, etc., and the whole administration was being regulated thereby. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's army used to battle for him. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 and his army were also infected by some disease. They are not well. They suffered from such a disease in which blood was required of them. The whole army used to consider 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 their god because they only had fuel, which was their precious wealth. There was nothing like it otherwise. There was also a shortage of food on the earth. There were also other tribes besides 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's, but those tribesmen were thought ordinary. When they bring Max as a prisoner there, they stayed on his back and said that he was a universal blood donor because his blood group was O negative. Max tries to flee from those people, but he is caught. Then 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 is seen coming out. He was not at least a human being because his skin was too infectious and he had masked his mouth mysteriously for breathing because 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's lungs and liver were damaged. So he had a breathing problem. People used to sloganeer his name whenever he stepped outside. For a while, he activates the water system and flows it for the people, and all are crowded to take it. And 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 used to deactivate the water system according to his will. Then a lady named 𝗪𝗪 appears. She was the daughter of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀. Otherwise, she was also the lieutenant of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's army. 𝗪𝗪 was looking for a deal in his neighborhood because time had changed and it appeared to be difficult to survive. They had patterned their vehicles according to the war. 𝗪𝗪 was driving a war rig while her army was pursuing her. 𝗪𝗪 changes his track of driving and does not move to their planned place. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 notices that 𝗪𝗪 has changed his way of traveling. He begins to suspect his daughter, 𝗪𝗪, so he moves to a cabin where there is a written statement on the floor that your children will not hold. The seat of commanders 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 had 4 wives because he wanted to extend his generation and later teach them the art of war. But 𝗪𝗪 is driving away, taking 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's wife afterward. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 alerts army because 𝗪𝗪 had realized that 𝗪𝗪 had started to revolt. 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's was ready to sacrifice their lives for him. But the greatest follower of 𝗪𝗪's army was 𝗪𝗂𝘁. The 𝗪𝗂𝘁 was also infected, as blood is required by the body. He will be the apple of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝘀, who will bring his wife back. So 𝗪𝗂𝘁 wanted to prove his loyalty here. Here it is observed that Max's blood was supplying 𝗪𝗂𝘁's body. So 𝗪𝗂𝘁 was extremely happy because the blood was required for him. So he takes Max with him. He was taking Max after strapping him to the vehicle. He had also masked his face, and that mask was made of iron. The 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 army begins to pursue 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀. War was the only purpose of their lives left for them. They used to rejoice. The battle is going on for the battle. They often played the music in their vehicles. Moreover, they also had deadly weapons. One more tribe attacks 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 when she is moving toward her destination. All warriors had their pursuits for this war. Who had arrived at that place? 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 wanted to battle 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀 for his wife, while that tribe wanted to battle for 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀, his war rig. It had the fuel, which was considered their wealth. 𝗪𝗂𝘁 reaches 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 while driving his vehicle speedily, but 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 strikes his vehicle. Then a sandstorm breaks out. It was directed towards them. 𝗪𝗂𝘁 had reached nearer to 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 for a rig because he had aimed to capture 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 at any cost. He also thinks about the suicide bombing, so that there may be an explosion and 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 is rigged to stop. They drive further into the sandstorm. Max knows that he will also be dead because of the explosion, so he forbids 𝗪𝗂𝘁 to do it. At first sight, Lennox's vehicles crash, then the sight is shown after the sandstorm. Max had restored his senses, but his face was covered with an iron mask. Moreover, he was also tied with 𝗪𝗂𝘁 lifting 𝗪𝗂𝘁. He moves forward there. Max observes the war rig of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀. He witnesses the wives of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀 going there. One of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀's wives was expected. Max points his gun at them. He imprisons them. First of all, Max asks them for water. Those girls hand him over a water pipe. Then he asks a cutter to cut the straps with which he was tied. One of 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀's wives helps Max. She tries to cut that chain but has no use. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 notices that 𝗪𝘂𝗀 has also joined the people of his surroundings with him and that he is moving towards her. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 wants to flee because she has no time, so she attacks Max. Max confronts 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 and hits her. In the meantime, 𝗪𝗂𝗀 also attacks 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀. 𝗪𝗂𝗀 cuts Max's chain while assisting him as he enters the sensors. 𝗪𝗂𝗀 tries to drive away. Grabbing 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 is a war rig, but that war rig is stopped while covering a little distance. It was not restarting. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 had set a code in his war rig, and there was a requirement to activate that code after a time. Then that war rig used to start up, and 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 was the only one who knew the code. So they run to the war rig and reveal the whole story of it to Max. Here, Max says, "I will only take 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 with me because 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀 is pursuing them because of his wives, and 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀 will stop pursuing them after getting his wives." But 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 rejects it, saying, "I will also bring these girls with me because I am going to a safe place where the chances of survival are possible." Agreeing with 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀, Max also takes 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀 as his wife. They immediately drove away, but 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀 was still chasing them. A problem is generated in the war rig, so Max repairs it by going outside. That war rig again becomes operative. Meanwhile, Max removes that iron face mask. It is noticed that 𝗪𝗂𝗀 has also gotten into the war rig of 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀, and he has attacked 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀. Then 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀�'s wife assists 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 here. Wanted to kill 𝗪𝗂𝗀, but 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀's wife advised her not to. He is doing this as a subordinate of 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀, so 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 throws him down from her war rig. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 and her people were driving forward speedily. There is a passageway between the mountains, so they direct themselves. They're coming by way of the mountains. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 hides Max and 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀 as wives because there was a tribe there. They were also bikers, and 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 had dealt with that tribe that she would bring fuel for them. In return, they will let 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 pass the way safe and sound, and they will explode at the starting point of the mountain, so the road may be blocked for 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀 and his army. When they see a large army of immortals, the tribe's bikers express their rage to 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀. They say to 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀, "We had thought that there would be a small army unit, but it is a large army now." 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 was getting worked up about the situation, so she had already informed Max of the next step. And she had also revealed that code to Max, feeling threatened. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 signals Max to flee. Max carries it out. He is driving away in a war rig while the tribesmen of bikers are also exploding there because they had thought that 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀 and his army were going to enter the region. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 tries to get into her war rig, but she is attacked by a biker anyhow. 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 has survived now. The entrance had been blocked for 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀, but they were moving forward towards their destination. But those bikers chased 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 because they had gotten wind that there was also someone else with her. After all, 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀 had given her words that she would be the survivor from here. 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀 and his army are trying to move further through the blocked path. There 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀 witnesses 𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀 there and also joins him in his army while bikers are chasing 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀 and her companions to capture them. Those bikers attempt to set the war rig on fire, but 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀 and Max bravely confront them. 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀 is going to fire his gun on 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀, who is moving near the war rig. Then an expectant lady appears before 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀. 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀 lets her go because she was going to be the mother of his kid. Being a member of 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗪𝗂𝗀, he struggles to move into the war rig of 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀. 𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗀 is caught at a place because of the chain of his hand and he had a gun, which fell off. 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 is infuriated to see it. There was also a giant in that army who was the son of 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀. That giant attacked them using a thrower that hits directly on the steering of the war rig. That steering is going to detach because of the thrower, but that expected lady cuts that thrower's chain with a cutter. Now the war rig was again under the control of Max, but that expectant lady was thrown out in 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀's vehicle, which was also moving from the backside. He wanted to secure the expectant ladies, so he adjusted the steering. 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 stops there for his expected wife while 𝗬𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀 and her companions drive forward. One of 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀's wives comes back and witnesses their 𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, who is disappointed that he has done nothing profitable, but 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀's wife satisfies him, and in 𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀's his heart pleases. Now 𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 decides that he will help out the wives of 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀. 𝗬𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 reveals her purpose to Max at night. She tells Max that she used to live in meadow as a child. This was the car. Its name was the Green Region, and she used to live there with her family. Then 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 attacked there, and he took 𝗬𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 with him, adopting her. She says, "I want to return to my family so I may survive like a human because the people here are not leading their lives here less than savagely." Then they pass a place that was a marsh where their war rig is entrapped. On the other hand, 𝗪𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀's army was still pursuing them. The expectant wife of 𝗪𝗵 was no more in 𝗪𝗵's man. 𝗪𝗵's child has also been murdered. 𝗪𝗪 loses his temper at the loss of his kid. 𝗪𝗪 says to his son Giant, "You had a brother who is dead." Now, that giant son was telling everyone there while screaming, "I had a brother who is dead now." Contrarily, 𝗪𝗁 was still trapped in the marsh. They were trying to free it, but to no avail. There was also a withered tree, 𝗪𝗂𝘁 says. "We may free our worship from it through this tree." They notice that 𝗪𝗵's close companion is moving toward them, so Max targets them with his sniper gun. But if it is missed, then 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗲𝗍 targets them as a result. The 𝗪𝗵 companion's eyes are spoiled and he is left blind. But the 𝗪𝗵 companion does not stop and is moving towards them while firing his gun. They struggled hard to get the 𝗪𝗁 from the marsh and succeeded. Their 𝗪𝗁 is freed and they drive further. Then they reached a place where there was a tower and a lady was shouting for help there. Despite this, Max understands that it is a trick played on them. When 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 gets off, some of the bikers also reach there. Here it is revealed that a lady calling for help was the mother of 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍. There was also another old woman who had some seeds. These were the seeds of vegetables and fruits, which were the last ones in the world. But they had no land to sow the seeds. 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 had come here with the hope that it was the place of meadow. She is dejected, seeing the land that has turned barren. Being disheartened, she shouts and weeps. 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍, his mother, tells her that the marshy place where you came was the land where we had to sow the seeds. But that land has also turned to barrenness. It was meadowland before the effects of radiation turned the whole land into barren land. So it happened. They decide at night that they will take the ladies and seeds to a place where there is a chance of survival. It means it may be meadowland. So they agree, having no option. Max requests that 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 see you because he plans to begin his journey in the morning. They give a bike to Max, and then they set out on the bikes. But Max begins to visualize his family members who were wanting to say, "Help 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 and her companions." Then Max changes his plan and he drives his bike back to them. As Max explains to 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍, "If you want to start your new life in search of meadowland, you may return to that place from where you have come." But there was a threat to them because of 𝗪𝗪. But 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 agrees, trusting Max, and returns the same way she came. It means the region of 𝗪𝗪. 𝗪𝗪 begins chasing them again after learning that 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 and her companions have returned. When war breaks out among them here, Max attempts to kill 𝗪𝗪, that old lady put to death who had seats. Then 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 pulls that 𝗪𝗪's mouth masks off. That mask was stuck with 𝗪𝗪's face, so his face was more horrified later. 𝗪𝗪 is dead on the spot. Then 𝗪𝗂𝘁 sacrifices his life. Here he explores his vehicle. Meanwhile, 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 was also fatally wounded, but she had reached her region. Now, knowing that 𝗪𝗪 is dead, his army is excited. They are left shocked to see that 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 has come back, and they accept 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 as their commander. They bring her upward. Here, Max sets out to his destination, and 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 looks at him going. Then a meadow location is shown in that region as being a commander. 𝗂𝘀𝘁𝗍 will